which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. And I'll record the roll. Let's see, because the lights are off. Sue? Vincent Paul? Yes. Ben?
Here.
Ruby, yes. Jeff?
Yeah.
Don? Christine? Here. Okay. So at this time, I entertain a motion that we go into non-public session for the purpose of the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee, the investigation of any charges against him or her unless the employee affected, 1, has the right to a public meeting, and 2, requests that the meeting be open, in which case the request should be granted. And then the purpose tonight is to discuss the final negotiations for public ratification.
So moved.
Okay. Jeff moved. Second?
Christine second.
Sorry. Okay. I couldn't tell if you said it or not because we were trying to wait. Okay, I don't have to call all the way to this? Yes. Okay. All right, so now I have to call the roll to go in? Yeah, okay, so Sue, still not here. Vincent Paul?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Me? Yes. Jeff?
Yes.
The agenda. I have some. I would like to add fund balance and communication upgrades as 2 additional items. And those are just reports. I don't believe they'll require any action, but
So we'll be on the fund balance, and we can add to that a motion to set aside the, what do you call it, the amount that we're able to put into the reserve.
okay.
Yeah, I can recommend a motion specifically that the school board vote to retain up to the maximum fund balance allowed under RSA 198(4)-6, which allows the district to retain year-end unassigned general funds in the amount not to exceed 2.5% of the current fiscal year's net assessment.
So that motion when we get there.
Okay, and then communication upgrades is a report, so those will be item 8, small revenue, and item 9. Unless there is an objection. And then I have a piece of correspondence just to share under announcements and recognitions, but I don't think we had a correspondence place, so maybe that's where we go. Okay, so moving on to minutes, we first have September 8th. Oh, I'm sorry, before that, progress towards school board goals. Number 1, successfully negotiate and support a collective bargaining agreement with the Newfound Area Teachers Association. We will be hopefully voting to ratify that this evening. So that is done, and now we need to do the support part. Number 2, evaluate the use and purpose of district assets in order to develop a long-range plan that meets the needs of our population. That's ongoing. On the 3rd one, improve communication between the board and its stakeholders. I'm working on an article to share a lot of the stuff that we've been looking at and the things that we've done, but to be honest with you, I don't really have the time to do that and to be chair. So I'm looking for one of you to volunteer to be the regular sort of correspondent. It doesn't have to happen often, but maybe like every 3 months, do an article that tells people what we've been doing.
They're jumping.
I know.
Think about it.
Okay, Christine will think about it. Thank you. At least that's something. Yeah. Okay, so now on to the minutes. Starting with September 8th. First, I do want to say I was disappointed we did not have these for September 22nd. Not sure what happened, but it would have been nice to have been able to review all those public comments before the second session. But I have a few corrections. On September 8th, page 3, small Roman numeral 5. I have underlined, and so honestly, I'm not sure why, so I'm double checking this. It says a 3-hour day position at New Hampton. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, then down below that, on small Roman numeral 7, I'd just like to insert the word "this" after the word "implementing." So instead of implementing this, comma, the Teachers Association decided to. Can you hear me, Leah?
Yes.
Okay. And then right below it, Roman numeral 8, can you change the word "make" in the second line to "determine"? And then on the next page 4, on number 15, can we just say the board welcomed Allison Smith, NRHS Junior, instead of Junior Allison Smith? Because it kind of looks like that's her name. And I actually brought my comments to give you, to put all of them in the minutes, because they're trunked on page 5, so I wanted all of them to be available. On page 5 also, under Dawn's comments, third line, can you change effect to affect? And on page 6, first paragraph, can you change architecture to architectural? On the bottom of page 6, Stephanie Bednaz, I'm not sure, but is that how her name's spelled? I thought it was with a Z. Okay, so it's in 2 or 3 places here with an S instead of a Z. And
So B-E-D-N-A-Z.
N-A-Z, yeah. Okay, then on page 7, under Julie Hayward's comments, her final comment was, get it over with, make a decision. And that's not in there. Then on page 8, the bottom of the first paragraph,
November 7th.
what?
Kill women.
No, actually, you can fix that, but can I finish? Because I've got a list, and then if you had that one, I see it now, I didn't catch it. So page 8, the bottom of the first paragraph, again, effecting to affecting. And the next person was Chantal Fournier, and she said no to mixed busing, so that comment should be added. Then under Jan Van Dusen, I think her name might actually be Joan, but I'm not sure. The last sentence, it says, finally, there are few. Can you just add the word are? There are a few. And next,
Can you
Yeah.
say that one again?
yeah, it says finally there are a few.
Oh, there are.
There are a few. Then under Jennifer McKay, change the word, the last sentence, it says it is not an education, it should be it is not on education. And then, I know it's long minutes, so there's a lot. On the bottom of page 8, Susan Colby commented on Jeffrey Levesque, so make that apostrophe S, Levesque. Then on the top of page 9, cross out the word to have after having, because it says having to have to come, so cross out to have. And then near the bottom of the page, under Jeff Levesque, it says, after it says 23 people responding, should be added that, bless you, I guess, that 12 voted in support of K6 because there were actually 2 votes taken, not just 1. Then on page 10, the big paragraph, Vincent calls paragraph, about halfway down, there's a sentence that says, rather than pay our profession staff, so just make that professional. Then on page 11, under my comment, it says, I stated that superintend Stacy Buckley, so just make it superintendent. On the same page, under Vincent Call, second line, change moral to morale, add an E. On the next page, 12, very first paragraph, last two words, add a U to dialogue. And Stephanie Bednaz is also on this page, and her name is with an S again. And then, this is just something that showed up in these 2 minutes. There were places where you list staff present. Then on the back, you list non-residents. They're both staff members. And I didn't see Peter Prosper on here, although I could have missed him, but he was definitely there. And a staff member. So I'm not sure why we identified staff this time if we weren't going to identify them all. Unless that's how they signed in, so I'm not sure. But it isn't something we usually do, so. Oh, it's all yours, Don.
Stacy and Lee. Right. Is that correct?
We're on page 8.
On page 2. 8 on.
She means guidance at Danbury and second grade at Bridgewater. She doesn't mean guidance in second grade in two schools.
Right, guidance is Danbury.
That was
Yep, so
confusing.
maybe filling the positions for guidance at Danbury and second grade at Bridgewater.
I helped it over to you.
Page 7 under government, it's November 2013, not 2013.
We're moving ahead.
You look really good for
That's all I have.
Okay, do you want to go over the September 22nd one? Anybody else? Okay, these are shorter, but I had a few things. On the first page, Jeff Lebeck, it says Jeff Lebeck lead. Can you take out the A and make that led? And then on the second page, under Christine's comments, she also said, what about New Hampton? They could leave and go to Interlakes. Trying to make sure it's complete here. So those comments are missing. Because she says, there's one school that's never part of the conversation, and that sort of doesn't make it clear what school she's talking about. Okay, you're not sure that's for a second. Page 3, first paragraph under Jeff Berg, succeeding is typed and it should be succeeding. And then in the same sentence, instead of gives, give us a reason. And page 4 under Tom Fitzpatrick, it says adding a wing to the high school, but at the high school, I'm sorry. But I think he meant middle school. What do you think, Ben? Because he's referring to you in this.
Which one?
Page 4. Tom Fitzpatrick's comment. He says he agrees with
I
them.
vaguely remember it, but I don't remember saying anything about building in the middle school, so.
Oh, okay.
Let's say if he's agreeing with me, then.
You should say that?
You could
Okay.
request a review of the tape.
Okay. I just thought that's, he was talking about the
I'm pretty sure it was high school.
high school? Okay. Then on page 5 at the very bottom, there's a sentence that just doesn't make sense. It says, she said, is the test scores were to drop. So I assume that means if the test scores were to drop, and yet it's still not a complete sentence, so I'm really not sure what she said there. So could you review the tape for that comment by Susan Colton? And then on page 6, Stacy Buckley's comments, third line up, just change overwhelmingly to overwhelming. Or overwhelmingly, sorry, so insert the ing.
Set up the I'm just trying to find it.
At the very bottom of the big chunk on page 6.
Okay.
Yep. And then on page 7, up about a third of the way down where it says Jeff said he was concerned that the middle school needs to be addressed in the plan. I want to add there that I asked him for an amendment to this motion to protect the building against closure. And we discussed how that would be worded. But in the end, there wasn't a motion made. Or, there wasn't a motion made, but there was no amendment made. Okay, so there's a lot of conversation there that wasn't captured.
So we'll review the tape and just make sure we capture it.
Yeah. And then finally on page 8, just the same thing, there's staff listed as non-residents. They may not all be staff, but at least half of them are. And so they should be moved up to staff, or else all of the staff should be listed as non-residents who are non-residents. And not, like, again, they might have just signed in that way, so you had to record it that way, I'm not sure. Does anybody else have any comments on that?
I have a question.
Yeah.
In regards to what gets put into notes from the public comment, how much of it ends up in there? Because Stephen Geyer from New Hampton definitely said more than what is listed here, and I'm just wondering what goes in, or what's
We can
selected.
answer, but I think she tries to capture the essence of the conversation, not dictated. Otherwise,
Right.
we've been here for years, but I think that's what she tries to do, correct, to try to get the essence of the meeting.
Do you want to add something else that he said?
I would have to go back and look myself.
Do you think he said something else that was as important?
Yes. So maybe we could review that.
Yes, I'm just reading my notes about his comments to see. He said he leans toward a high school toward a junior high addition. Oh, maybe No, don't say that. You'll have to double check. That was a comment from Ben, not from me. So, I may not have more than what's here. Yes?
Madam Chair, if I may address a representative from New Hampton's comments. I don't want this to come out like an I told you so, but an opportunity for a commercial. One of the things that we found ourselves doing a couple of years ago was spending all of this time correcting a very large litany of minutes that we had for each meeting. And so the essence of the change in format was to just record any vote that was taken and to capture the least amount of the essence of the discussion. with the expectation, because it's video recorded and audio recorded, that the enhancement of the communication would be far more accurate if those who wanted to know what actually was said would go back and listen to the audio. But the legal record for the school board is only necessary to record the vote and who voted in which way. Otherwise, we find ourselves spending a lot of time correcting what becomes, is it a transcript or a set of minutes? So.
Well, thank you. I wasn't really looking for correcting. I was just trying to get clarification because of that conversation piece. So if it's capturing the essence, then that's fine. And I will go back myself and review that. So I'm not trying to change it. I'm just trying to get an answer on how much really of that gets put in there.
Some schools don't record any of the conversation at all.
Right, and it would be forever. Absolutely, I understand that. That's why I just had that question.
Well, this was a little different type of meeting too. We wanted all the input we could get, and I find it helpful to see that in print so that I can review it. Because I made my own notes, but I didn't catch some things. So this was a little different. Normally wouldn't go on like that.
Yeah, the point though that I'm trying to make is that in spite of the fact that the warning box sits in front of minutes, warning that there may be corrections to it, and as you saw this evening, there are substantial corrections to it. People take this as, the gospel of what happened, and it's really not correct until you look at what the changes were in the subsequent meeting. So as much as we can eliminate that, it would behoove everyone to go back and listen to the actual minutes of the audio.
Okay, any other comments on the minutes?
I was going to defer to you, but I'll take it if you don't mind. I think it's pertinent at this point to record the fact that to make the point that the vote that was taken at the last meeting on September 22nd was clearly a vote to direct the superintendent in the majority to come up with the plan to actually move to a K-6 configuration. It was not to do a study. It was not to consider it. It was to come up with a plan. And there's been a lot of chatter, if you will, that it seems to be confused about it. There should be no confusion. The school board decided by majority vote to do that. And there is a policy in place that says when the school board does make a majority vote, that the whole board gets behind it. And forgive me if I can't refer that specific policy, but I could find it if you want. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Any other comments on minutes? Okay, if there's no objection, we'll go to the consent agenda. Are you going to take that? Okay, thank you.
We get the board, but not apparently the paper.
Yeah, paperwork's fine, we can put it back.
I got it.
Okay,
As modified.
right. Okay, under old business, we have second read of policy BDDH, public participation at board meetings, GE exit interviews, and the third one is KBA, the public's right to know. I think I asked this last time, but with the second reading, do we have to take a vote, or does it automatically go through if there's no objection?
No, you should take a vote.
Take a vote.
To approve the policies.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions on this, these three? They haven't changed since we saw them last time. So if there's no objection, we'll move the three policies to the consent agenda. The next item is the New Hampshire School Board Association's request for resolutions.
That was just a reminder, in case
Okay.
anybody had any.
What I figured. Thank you. I don't have any. Anybody else? Okay, I think they get enough. Okay, new business. First item is the review of the auditor's report.
You have that in your packet. I know Dawn and Mike have spent some time talking about it, so we can certainly answer any questions you have about it.
I have a question for Mike.
Yes. Sorry.
Mike, my review of this did not see any findings.
There's one adverse finding, which is the same finding as last year. I think it's on page 1, the basis for an adverse opinion. It's the same opinion of looking at post-employment benefits, which we have virtually, we don't have enough that warrants, and I looked at the same opinion from the prior year. It warrants a study. I think the study would cost more than what it and I'm gonna do some research on this to put in a liability for it, to see if we can do that internally this year, to avoid this opinion. But we really don't offer any post-employment benefits, so what would that liability be, and what would we be studying for? So, I think it's a Gatsby 45 item, and it's probably something they're putting in everybody that does not have a liability for that. So I look at it as more as very insignificant as far as its impact on the financials, which on page 2, in an unmodified opinion, they say that the financial statements referred to represent fairly in all material respects the financial position of each major fund. So I would say that they're acknowledging too that's not significant.
So those are the only two then. There's a second one on page 2.
It's the same thing.
No. It's the same thing. It's the OPEB, which is the other post-employment benefits other than pensions and government activities.
Okay. Because usually they're outlined pretty clearly if there are adverse effects.
Yeah.
This is kind of buried.
Actually, the paragraph above that, they address that
Yeah,
and say that
it's true.
it doesn't fairly represent the financial position.
That is the adverse opinion. And I'm saying that it is so insignificant, as was stated in last year's managerial report, which I'll be writing as well for this year, that this would warrant a study to be done on the district, an actuarial study, which I think in itself would cost you more than what the whole liability would be. And that was the same response you got last year as a district opinion.
And we got no adverse comment on the manifest?
No,
I was expecting that, weren't you?
it's fairly commonplace in many districts across the state to do that,
Yeah,
so you don't impede payroll.
Yeah. right. Well, I got a little lost in this report, I have to tell you, because I was looking for the fund balance, and there were so many different ones that I didn't know what I was looking at.
So I was gonna say, you can discuss fund balance here.
Yeah.
It's really the unreserved fund balance, and we go off of the DOE 25.
But I don't know what page. Can you tell me?
We're going to talk about banking.
I don't know, do we want to talk about it now or save it for later?
It is an appropriate conversation to have in review of your financial report. You can save it later if you want, because I could quickly just review what it is.
I think while we have the papers in front of us, we might as well move it up to this unless there's objection.
Yeah, I'm inclined to want to discuss it now just because there's more public here now than there will be later.
I had planned on doing that because it is. So what we're talking about really is the 116. Fund balance in governments is really considered to be equity in the private sector if you want to draw a comparison. What you're looking at is there's committed fund balance and assigned fund balance. That's fund balance that is essentially going to be carried forward into next year to cover encumbrances from the prior year and other commitments, whether it be a building project or what you're looking at is what is the unassigned fund balance, which is the remainder of basically unused revenues. So of that, if you take away what we're going to discuss, I'm going to ask you to the vote, which is also something that was added to this, the motion to vote on what to do with that fund balance. You would retain a certain portion of it, which you know you had around a starting fund balance of $350,000 from the prior year. We can retain, according to the RSA, about $407,000. I'm going to ask you to vote on a little bit more. Actually, I have a paperwork on it here. The retaining of about $407,741. This is not in addition to the $350. This is including that. So when you look at it, it's like, what do you have total unassigned fund balance, which you can see there is $1.45 million.
So you want to take the 407 out of that?
That is the maximum you can retain, according to the RSA.
Which would give $1,001,000 back to the taxpayers?
Right, and specifically, it would be $1,033,898. The question is where do we stand in a budget that would warrant something like that? One of it, if you were to look at revenues on here, and I won't bore you guys with all that, but there are other or miscellaneous revenues received by the district. $389,000 of that was the return of surplus from LGC's lawsuit. We referred to it as a premium holiday. The auditors have instructed us that we have to list that as revenue. So that's revenue that did not go to the appropriation, so it's addition to. So that's part of this fund balance.
Okay.
And it's the employer portion, so some of that went back to the employees, about $340,000 stayed here.
And so is that on page 18 if I'm looking for it?
So that wasn't budgeted.
Other
That wasn't budgeted as a
local,
revenue coming in.
Unexpected.
yeah, I would consider that other local revenue in the area of $471,000. So that's the large part of that. And some of it's just efficiency in the budget. Remember, we had a $350,000 fund balance, but you also had $199,000 worth of contingencies built into your budget, which we did not use. So the question is do you use them because they're there? No, we did not need to use those contingencies, so we didn't. We're giving them back to the taxpayers.
Can you tell me again what page that?
That's not, they didn't put in the detail behind all this, so I'm just explaining it through the activities of the district last year.
And where does that $1 million come
Since you
from?
mentioned those, can you get specific? The 199?
The 190, yeah, we had, I think I did report on all of our contingencies earlier, and I do have a report on them, but you had special ed contingencies, you had health insurance contingencies,
Facilities.
Perhaps as the discussion goes on, you can find the detail that makes up that number, because this is absurd to have this much left. Now, I grant you that the health trust retention that turns out to be unbudgeted revenue was a surprise. So that puts a little bit of a blip in that.
well, if you consider 600,000 right off the board, should be left over. It absolutely should, and unless you have a budgetary emergency, almost 600,000 of that should absolutely have been left over.
Because it's contingencies.
Yeah,
It's contingencies
and
and the-
revenue that was unexpected, which you should not be using unless you absolutely have to. Because the taxpayers, if you think about it, have paid that out to employees in prior years. Shouldn't you return that?
Well, wait a minute, I got a bunch of questions on this. You and I know that the $350,000 from last year that we retained under RSA 198, the first time we did that, was in addition to the contingencies of $199,000.
Correct.
That we didn't use. Now, you and I also know that that was in excess of 2.5% of the money raised by taxes. But then through contact with DOR, you ascertained that that was legally done.
The contingencies are not in excess of that, they're included in your operating budget, so those are
I'm not talking
internal.
about the contingency, I'm talking about the 350,000. That number is in excess of 2.5% of the monies raised by taxes.
I don't know if you raised the full 2.5% last year. In the budget that we presented for 15, you didn't, you actually came well below the tax cap. So I didn't,
And wait a minute.
Yeah.
On the day that you and I discovered this almost simultaneously, we decided to go back to DOR and ask, how was it that we took more? How was it that they legally told us we could take more than 2.5% of the funds raised by taxes?
the local assessment.
You investigated that, and you came up with an adequate answer to say that DOR was correct, that we could raise $350,000, which is more than the RSA allows for at 2.5%.
No, it's exactly what the RSA allows for at 2.5%, because we were looking at that point in the conversation that you and I had, we were looking at only, not looking at the state taxes, which is a portion of your local tax assessment. It is the whole local tax assessment, which includes state and education tax. Which is what the question was. So I'm trying to tell you that it's a little bit different than what you're saying, but that's what we're looking at.
All right, so that's how you came up with $404,000 for this year.
Correct, and that number has been verified by the Department of
Okay.
Revenue.
Now, that said, that doesn't mean that we have to retain that much. That
No, it does
doesn't
not.
mean that
You
we
can retain zero. you
have to
can all of it.
retain any contingencies. And it also doesn't, well, I don't want to go there yet. It also want to verify this, that this 1.458 is after we paid back the state $250,000 on Project Promise,
That is also not correct. It's 144,000,
144.
very different.
Okay. So that's after we paid back the state $144,000.
Correct.
So I would, if I can also add, remember, we didn't create this budget. There was limited detail about the budget, so we were very conservative in spending just because we were not sure. One was, how did the district spend money? Because the process, people don't encumber funds here, we are now doing that. So we had no idea, like, in April, were we gonna get a rash of orders of people coming? We have no history of how spending happened, so we were both very conservative on our spending, not sure what was really in the budget and how much flexibility we have, what was the spending pattern of the district. We now have some different processes set up so that we can, hopefully by January, February, have a really good understanding of what the bottom line is this year.
I
So
would
now
say
my question
we
is-
surpassed the conservative. We just reviewed every single purchase. Because being conservative would normally make it appear that we held back on some expenses, but we covered all of our capital projects that we had in our capital project plan. And we reviewed every single expenditure. So we didn't actually deny any expenditures based on budgetary restrictions.
So now, here's a question I want to ask, and I'd like to get an answer before we make any decision. So maybe it's a snappy answer and you might have it.
Sure.
Is it possible for us to put aside that, for lack of a better term, let me finish the question, okay?
I'm not saying anything.
The $1.458 million, knowing that that's there and available for us to do a retained fund balance, return it to the taxpayers, etc. Can we also just put it aside and say, after we do the budget and have determined that the budget should be, and I'm just picking a number, $20 million for this year, can we actually fund that budget of $20 million at 18.6 and use this 1.4
No.
toward that budget? We
No, you
cannot
can't.
do that.
That's why
That's why
the
the
whole
retained
point.
fund balance exists.
Yeah, because that's what you're actually doing with that's why my motion, not my motion, my request that you motion is to retain the maximum allowed under that. And what we did not put in this budget request is any planned contingency, which makes sense, because your contingency is that $404,000.
I'm always concerned about the excess that goes back to the cities and towns, because it's not clear to me, and I don't know if there's public officials in the audience tonight that can help clarify this or not, but it's not clear to me that if we give back the money that we overtaxed the taxpayers for and took from them, that each of the individual towns will use those funds to reduce the tax burden to the school for the subsequent budget that we're going to come up with.
I think we've had that discussion and it varies by town.
It does.
Because in my town, it's applied against taxes, but there are other towns that spend it.
On something else.
Something else.
That's my concern. That's the fundamental reason why I was concerned that this budget was $1 million too high last year. And being conservative, we just did not need to tax the taxpayers that high. So I'm thinking that we should try a year without any contingencies, in my opinion, and without a retained fund balance, even though I'm the one that advocated having a retained fund balance, because this is getting out of here.
Well, I would definitely disagree with that, because you didn't really analyze the situation. And if you look at where you should actually look at where you had savings before you make a statement like that. So I'll give you an example. There was, beside the 200 in contingencies, which we have taken out of the budget, there's 25,000 in professional wage savings. There's 36,000 instructional support wage savings. There's 31,000 transportation savings, and there's 150,000 in sped tuition savings. Almost 105,000 district-wide contracted services and professional development, some of which is mandated be put in there. So you have every single year in your budget. So when we look at that, it adds up. So I would say that you were probably $500,000 out of a $20 million budget in efficiency, which we should be looking to do every single year to do that. However, it was an exceptional year for not having placements in special education. We have already experienced more than that in placements this year. So I would say that when you budget, you don't take a blanketed approach like that, and you actually look at your history, which is why sometimes you will incur savings like this in a budget. And it would go right back to the
history shows that every year we give back 5, 6, 7, one year was 900,000, and now this year we're giving back $1.4 million. I disagree with what you're suggesting here.
I think you have to, sorry.
And that's just going to be my position on budgeting this year.
I think you have to look at where those areas are that we didn't spend. It wasn't in supplies. It was, so when we talk about staffing changes, it means we hired, so a teacher left who might have been, master step 15, and we hired somebody at a bachelor step 5, but we don't know that when we're doing the budget. So those, and you could be talking $10,000 or $15,000 a person, so you're talking some significant. I know health insurance, if we had in the budget because the person had a family plan and the person comes in, doesn't take health insurance, that could be a $20,000 saving. So there's those pieces that you really are hard to control. Special ed is the other one, so I think it's a great thing that we need money for that.
When we go through the budget and we talk about these individual examples of professional services, the wages, the sped tuition that we didn't spend, etc., we're going to have to take a real sharp look at that again this year.
So, and you'll see in the budget.
And make certain that those are not padded areas, if you will.
And so,
every year they turn out to be padded areas by several $100,000.
And you'll see
And then when the money goes back to the towns, it may or may not get given back to the towns to reduce the education bill. And that's what concerns me. That's our responsibility to the taxpayers.
Well, the town has a responsibility to their taxpayers.
Yeah, it's just that
Reduces their tax rate.
Right.
And that's up to the town and the voters, not us.
Jeff?
I understand your concern, but on the other hand, my concern is we don't give away all our savings of money out of our personal savings accounts just because we had a good year and we don't think we're going to need it next year.
understood.
I think that we need to be very conservative in our budgeting, but I think that we do need to retain funds, and I'm not opposed to retaining just 350, but I think that we should at least retain what we retained last year.
Okay, when the discussion comes for that, maybe we can kick around a number that seems reasonable.
John, did you want to say something?
The intent, as you mentioned, for that 350,000 was to eliminate the contingencies. And, Mike came in September and, he wasn't necessarily aware of everything that had transpired. So he was basing his, and you can correct me, Mike, the way I understood it was you were basing a lot of your budget on the prior budget.
Well, some of it. And remember, like some of the statements you heard Benny say, it's like, well, we don't need these funds. We have always padded the budget. It's blind generalizations, no specifics. And if you look at areas like in special ed, you far exceeded the budget. And then you have a year when you actually get a savings in an area. To say that that was padded makes no sense.
Special ed's unpredictable, it's probably the most unpredictable piece of the budget.
Yes, I recognize that.
And if
I
you-
don't believe I used the word padded at any time.
Actually
I
did.
think you just did, yes.
Okay, then I stand corrected. I apologize. But be that as it may, the budget has been significantly over for several years in a row, and perhaps has been padded. The retained fund balance is for that explicit purpose, and that was the argument I made to the public when I spoke in favor of using RSA 198, which was to allow us to not do contingency funding anymore.
And I think that's been our plan.
And that's the
Do that
plan, and when
exactly
you get
that
to the
way.
budget presentation, you're gonna actually see a real look at actual figures and a different use of funds that actually you can start improving your buildings, because you've been in a level funded mentality for quite a while, which you don't want governments to have to do.
Okay, so we're gonna get there.
Okay.
All right, any other comments on the auditor's report?
I think real quick to go just back into this fund balance issue is that, I think it's gonna be important as we move into the budget, and I think it would be, helpful for understanding both this past year and this coming year is quite honestly where, if I look at it and I say there's roughly $340,000 that came back from the LGC/Health Trust lawsuit, and there's the $350,000 that was retained last year, and there's the $200,000 worth of contingencies that weren't used. And to me, I kind of look at that and say, well, that's acceptable, that was anticipated stuff, and you hope not to use your contingencies, and you didn't expect these revenues. But that's $568,000 roughly that's left over that, I understand, if we were able to save some money, whether it be through shifts in employees or, more or less, or different tracks. But I think it's gonna be important, for myself in particular, to understand where that padding contractual obligation type money comes into play. And I mean, if it's $500,000, then I guess that's what it has to be, but, just the comment, I think putting some money away isn't a terrible idea, but $568,000 kind of should come with an explanation. It's almost like it's very important to understand where the $19.5 roughly million got spent, but it's also important to understand why almost $600,000 didn't get spent at the same time, especially moving into the public sector.
I think this is not a consent agenda item. And that we'll be discussing it more when we get to, so I think even though we discussed it now, that maybe we need to keep this later on our agenda and discuss it again after we see this year's budget presentation, because it might be a little more clear by then. Does that sound good? Okay. So, the next thing we have is policy BEA/BEAR for board signature, and Jeff, did you want to?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we table that until it's reviewed by the policy committee.
Second.
So a motion to table that and return it to the policy committee. by Jeff and a second by Ben. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So now we'll go back to policy. Next, we have field trip request.
You have actually two requests, both from the high school. They're both overnight. One is for the, it's actually part of the outdoor club that is looking forward to go outdoor camping one night right here in Bristol, 17th through the 18th. Peter Dumont is the advisor for that club. And the other one is the annual NHASC fall conference that the high school goes to. It looks like about 12 students going with 2 chaperones.
And what is it?
It's
NHASC?
the Student Council, New Hampshire
Okay.
Association of Student Councils.
Thank you. Any questions on that?
How heavily chaperoned is this trip?
Which one?
The overnight?
Actually, the conference is heavily, that's very well chaperoned.
No, he means the Slim Baker Live one.
Oh, I believe there's 2 chaperones going with about 20 students.
I'm concerned that is adequate. Or I should say, I'm concerned that that's not adequate.
Is that in addition to the teacher?
I believe there's 2 chaperones going.
So 2 adults and 20.
2 adults and 20 students.
Overnight,
Yeah.
in the woods.
I'd like to see that ratio a little bit more.
I think we get the picture.
Want to at least have a third.
I was looking for more than, I was looking to do 100% increase in this budget. Is it possible that we could get 2 more?
I will ask. I think it's a hard one to fill, but,
I don't know.
Mike, if you know anything about the outdoor club, how would...
I believe it would be tough to get 2 more. I think we would work on getting 1 more, understanding that if we don't, we can't go.
It's this week, so I don't think there's a lot of time for them to recruit.
I believe, I'll be honest with you, this is a trip they have done before.
And we've signed up for it.
No, I believe that because it was Project Promise, they didn't think they had to bring it to the board. And I said that it is part of the school district, so therefore it needs to go to the board, so I think actually,
I understand, and when I went to high school, which was before also, we had a rifle club.
yeah.
I don't think a rifle club would fly anymore. So
We have a hunter safety course.
Yeah, so
Laconia Christian didn't have trouble getting more than 2 chaperones for their overnight camping trip.
I would say we're not Laconia Christian, so.
We will borrow some of theirs.
Yeah, so that would be a whole
We also have the
board.
complication of people having to have been fingerprinted ahead of time. So you can't just say to parents now,
Well,
can you
that's why
join
I
us?
asked if there were
Yeah.
any teachers, because
Yeah.
several of the Laconia Christian chaperones were teachers.
if it's of any consequence, the concern emanated several days ago when I received my packet.
Yeah, no, I can understand the concern.
I just want to be on record as having that
Yeah. So, and the
concern.
board can certainly direct me to add increase, and if they don't have the staff, then they can't go.
And ladies want to go camping this weekend? Look at Mimi's face. Okay, anyone else? So, should this be on the consent agenda or separate?
Why don't you make it separate?
Okay. So we'll move that there, field trips to individual items.
Waterville, I don't think anybody has an objection to that one. That was with board approval last year.
Yeah, that's an annual trip.
With 2 chaperones, but
Yeah, but that is very, that's a very structured,
Yeah.
very intensive.
Adults.
Yeah, a lot of adults there.
And actually, they have like CPR, first aid people, plus they have leaders and advisors, so it looks like they might really have more than two. So consent agenda for Waterville Valley trip? Okay, station? Yes. Okay, next we have the updated enrollment report, which is all color coded this time. So that must make you happy? Color coded spreadsheet.
It's the same thing the board, it was on the board last year saw.
I think I see Dana's influence here.
Yeah. And I just updated it with current enrollment numbers on it. So the easiest way to think about this is by color. So I think if you go down for new board members, because it is a little overwhelming, is just if you look at like the top line is the light brown is if it goes across, that's the same class. So you can just predict out a little bit better what enrollment will be.
I have a question.
Okay, Vincent, go first.
Stacy, I noticed the numbers in italics are projected enrollment numbers, not actual.
Right.
And so you go down to, help me understand this. After the year 2016, read it for me, I don't want to make any assumptions.
Yeah, so-
What basis are you increasing?
So I am just literally using the same number. So if you look at the October 2014 column, so you see how at Bridgewater Hebron, there's 17 students in kindergarten.
So she carries 17.
I just carry 17 over. I don't make any assumptions of loss or gain.
She moves
I
into
just
first
actually
grade
carry
next
the-
year, and then to second grade the year after, and then to third grade the year after.
How do you move the kindergarten numbers?
How do I move them?
Yeah.
Into first grade, and then
Move them
the
into
year.
first grade, then second grade. So if you, the left side is, so from, if you look at the 14-15 year, the left side is the projected numbers, just basically using current year's enrollment. So if you notice, like kindergarten for the next 3 years, there's no number there. I have no way. The only way you can predict those numbers is to really do, and I talked about it last year, was if you did, got birth rates for all of your communities and calculated out when those kids would be enrolling in school, which would take, that's just a lot of work. I don't have time. A lot of companies will hire a company to, like School Boards Association will do that for you. For a fee, they'll go out and do, you can do parent cards who has kids that are, eligible to enroll at some point in the next 10 years to try to gather those numbers and that data. But that's the only way really to gather that data. So I have not estimated out what those numbers will look like at any point.
Oh, done first.
Our town records the verse in the town
Yep.
in the annual report.
Right.
So I'm not sure about the other towns, but
Yeah.
that could be the source for
It could be.
at least,
Yep.
a qualified number in there.
Yeah, and I think last year we talked about me looking at those. Honestly, it's low priority because I just don't have time. It's a lot. That's a lot of time, a lot of very time-consuming data crunching. Looking through every annual report, you have to go back because you have to capture every kid who was born.
It also presumes they're all gonna go to
They're all gonna go to school, that they're all
Right.
still living in the community. I mean, and that's the presumption you have to make,
I recall having this discussion with you about what's a good choice.
Right, how do you figure those numbers out? You're really guessing.
I mean, it's not unreasonable to make these assumptions.
Right.
However, the trend is showing downward, and for the points you just made, it's likely that homeschooling, they may move out,
Right, there's a lot of things.
so the trend's likely to continue downward, not change. So I just want to speak to that as being a possibility, because all the information that's available to us projected outward shows a decrease across the board in the state. I understand the use of these numbers is not unreasonable.
But our numbers are actually going up over the next 4 years in total, both at the middle school and the high school.
That's a projection.